Hey folks, if you've ever felt that the damage in Last Epoch feels a little bit spiky or inconsistent, if you ever feel like you're just going through the game feeling completely safe and then suddenly you just die out of nowhere from a huge spike of damage, this will be the video for you where I jump into that with some math and examples, and hopefully at the end of it, we'll all be a little bit more informed and we can have some good takeaways. If you like these sort of math videos, please leave a like on it as it lets me know to make more of them. So let's jump into the example that I have here. So I made my first hardcore character in Last Epoch a couple days ago, and this is, I want to play for you guys my death clip, as I think it serves as a very good example of what I'm talking about here. So we are level 47, we have, between our ward and health, about 1500, which is very significant for this point in the game. We have 50% plus res across the board. We have a bit of armor that works out to about 10% damage reduction to non-physical. So pretty tanky character. Like overall for this point in the game, extremely tanky. Anyway, let's play the clip. So here you can see, I'm just going through the campaign. Nothing out of the usual here. And pay attention to the amount of damage this first hit does here. So up until this point, you can see this is the largest hit I have taken. So 365, which just goes to show how tanky this character is for this point in the game. You can see a few other hits from the vines I'm summoning because I'm using the extra like 120 health boots. I forget what they're called, but you can see the damage numbers on the vines. So 365 to me, 343 here, 338, and a crit here, 667. So this is roughly how much damage these meteors are doing. It makes sense, pretty reasonable, and given these numbers, I should have no reason to be afraid, because I have well over 1400 effective health here, like significantly more, so I should be fine, right? Anyway, let's continue playing the clip, and dead. So pretty much full to 0 instantly. Now what happened here? There's a little bit of stuff that we need to go through, and I will jump into the math afterwards. But first, let's play this back on slow-mo so we can see exactly what happened. Now, visually, it's really hard to see because we have a white background here with white attack indicators. Now, my vision isn't the best, but it's not that bad. However, I find it very difficult to see these circles when the background color is so similar to the attack. This goes for purple attacks on purple backgrounds, blue attacks on blue, and so on, right? Like this is, I think, a common theme is a lack of visual clarity, and this is a pretty good example of where that can be difficult to deal with. Now, obviously on slow-mo, you can kind of see it, like you can see what's going on, but on normal speed, this is very hard to see, and then also know where you need to go to avoid it. But anyway, so we'll continue. What actually happens here is that I stand in the exact overlap of both circles. But even then, the first hit we saw was 350 damage. So even if I stand in an overlap, and both of these crit, so that would be 700 damage followed by 700 damage, even in that case, I should survive because I'm proccing Reactive Ward, which will give me another boost of health in between each of the hits. So I should be fine. But we die. And I mean, it's a little bit weird, right? But let's jump into it, do a little bit of math, and understand what's going on. So let's move ahead to the damage screen. So you can see here we took a 946 crit. You might be wondering, so how do we go from a 350 damage hit to a 950 damage crit? And if we jump into the game, you can actually see, even in the game guide, we go to critical strikes, you can see all enemy hits that can crit have a crit multi of 200%. And I tested this pretty significantly. This does mean 2 times. This is not 3 times. When it says crit multi 200%, that is 2 times damage. So you would expect it would be about 700. And that's what I expected too. But then I did even more testing. And what I found was that the damage that you do, and also monsters do, have a pretty significant range. It's not just like a static value where the same amount of damage every time. You probably noticed this. You're probably aware of this. But what I wasn't aware of was just how large that range actually is. So I did some testing with Lightning Blast. Basically what I did was I hit the dummy with Lightning Blast over and over for several minutes, and I recorded the highest and lowest hits that I saw during that period. So this should give a pretty good indicator of the range. Now keep in mind these numbers are very likely to be rounded, so it's probably more like 81 point something to 121 point something. But these are the numbers that I saw. And it worked out to be that the largest hit that I took was about 1.5 times the lowest hit. So very, very significant damage range. And this isn't indicated anywhere in-game. So if we jump back to the game real quick, you can see if you look at weapons, you go to the skill tree, every source of damage, there's no range. Like there's nothing to indicate that there's a range anywhere. Even if we go to the skills, so we go to Glacier here, there's nothing to indicate that there's a damage range. So if you go to like a lot of other ARPGs, there's usually some sort of damage range either on the weapon or the abilities that gives you like an indicator that not every hit's going to be the same, but in Last Epoch we don't really have that. And in the game guide, there's no information on this that I've been able to find. It seems like this is sort of just like a hidden black box magic sort of thing that just happens as part of the damage calculation. And it makes the damage feel significantly more spiky and inconsistent than it probably should be. So jumping back to the spreadsheet, I did the math on how I died to determine exactly how lucky or unlucky I got here. And what was really interesting is that not only did the first hit that I took in the beginning of the video there, the 350, that was actually almost near the bottom. So this gave me a false sense of security that I was completely safe because I took a low roll hit. But then the big hit, the one that actually killed me, this was a high roll. So this was an 82 percentile hit towards the top, and it was a crit. So in total, versus the expected amount of damage that you would take, I took 2.27 times that amount. So like huge spike of damage, and this could be even higher. It wasn't quite the max hit, but even still, that's pretty significant difference. And what's even more crazy is that if the first hit would have been a crit, so the only way I die here is that the first hit is a non-crit and the second hit is a crit. If the first hit would have crit, it would have procced my reactive ward, which actually would have given me more ward back than the extra damage taken from the crit, which would have allowed me to live this damage burst. So if both of these hits were crits instead of just one, I actually would have survived. If the first hit was a crit and the second one wasn't, it would have procced reactive ward and then I would have survived. And if neither were crits, I would have survived. And even if this was a lower, like if this was a midpoint, like there was no roll ranges on the hits, I also would have survived in that case too. So the only way we actually die here is in this pretty much exact scenario where we take a high roll crit right after a non-crit. Pretty crazy stuff, and that's, I think, pretty much why I feel like, for one, the damage is very inconsistent. I think this range is too large, personally, as it doesn't really give players a good feeling of how much damage they're going to take. Like, that's very inconsistent when you can take such a huge range, especially on hardcore, where it's very hard to test the waters and find out if you're actually safe or not. I feel like maybe this could be plus or minus 5% rather than 20%, and then that would make the damage feel a lot less spiky and inconsistent. Or even if there was something in the game or in the game guide that indicated that these damage ranges existed, that would be, I think, personally a huge improvement. And if you want to go and do this math yourself, if you want to test and see how much damage a monster should actually do, the way I did these calculations is I went to Tunk Labs, and you can find the damage of the abilities and also the damage scaling of the area that you were in. And that's how I came up with these numbers. The other important lesson learned here is that I think it's extremely important to have some sort of crit mitigation as soon as you possibly can. And crit avoidance, unless you have 100%, is just not going to be enough. It won't work because you are going to have one hit coming through and that will kill you. If you are doing a hardcore run, that's the end of your run. So it's very important that you deal with these crits so this spiky damage is not going to one-shot you. And there's a few ways for you to do that. So for one, you can get crit avoidance on your gear. Some passive trees have it. And you can also get blind. So this wasn't something that I was able to find on my run because it's very early. This is another problem. I feel like in Last Epoch, it's very, very difficult to get a reliable source of crit mitigation early in the game. You only get it much later in monoliths, either through unique items, I think the Woven Flesh is one of them, or through exalted affixes, or through certain base types, like the crit reduction boots. Stuff like that is much easier to come by later in the game. Early on, blind is kind of your best bet. Maybe you want to include it in your filter, but even then, if you don't do enough hits, you're probably not going to be able to reliably apply blind. So you sort of just have to accept that depending on your build, you might just have a chance of randomly dying to a hit that's like 3+ times higher than it should be. So a little bit weird, but yeah, hopefully you guys learned something from that. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.